Good afternoon. We're now calling the meeting to order. I apologize for being 15 minutes late. We had an executive that ran a little late. I note that some of the participants are participating via video conference. Today's public meeting is also being live streamed from the Port Authority website. We will now hold a public committee meeting, starting with the Committee on Finance, which will be chaired by Commissioner LaBarbera, which will be followed by a committee on Capital Planning, Execution, Asset Management, which will be chaired by the Vice Chair, and which will conclude the public portion of today's meeting. First, we'll hear from Commissioner LaBarbera.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today's meeting of the Committee on Finance is being held in public session. The committee also met in executive session earlier today to discuss matters involving ongoing negotiations or reviews of contracts or proposals. At this point, I ask the Secretary to advise those present of the composition of the Committee on Finance and any commissioner recusals on the matter before the committee at today's meeting.
The committee includes Commissioner LaBarbera, the committee chair, Commissioner McCabe, the committee vice chair, and Commissioners Fine, Kelly, and Richardson. All committee members are present with the exception of Commissioner Richardson. In addition to the committee members, also present are Chairman O'Toole, Vice Chairman Linford, Commissioners Bolwage, Helmy, and Rosado. There are no recusals.
Thank you very much. I now call on our Chief Financial Officer, Libby McCarthy, to present the financial performance results for the first half of 2024. Libby?
Thank you, Commissioner, and good afternoon, everyone. So let me just start with something. So I'll frame things starting out. So this will be the 6-month financial results. I will just note that these results are best understood when read in conjunction with the annual financial statements and the accompanying notes, which are on our website. The other thing I will note for you is that the information I'm going to present today is prepared on the basis of our bond resolution, which is the basis we use to set our budget. This information, along with the financial information prepared on the basis of generally accepted accounting principles, will be posted on our website later today. The financial results for the first 6 months were quite strong. Net operating revenues were totaled $1.4 billion and were $82 million or 6% higher than the same period in 2023. As compared to the budget, the results were $65 million or 2% higher than budget. When you add in then net non-operating revenues, our net revenues available for debt service increased $130 million versus the same period in 2023 and were $93 million over our budget for the period. And I'm going to walk through for the board the various things that drove that. First, let me start. I always start with where is activity year over year. From the airport's perspective, we're continuing to see record volumes at our airports. So the passenger volume in the first half of 2024 was 1.4% higher than 2023 levels. For the period, nearly 71 million passengers traveled through our 3 major airports. As compared to the budget, we are just slightly under the budget for the period. And then if I move over to TB&T, the results there were at the bridges and tunnels, we had a total of 60 million vehicles using the crossings, and it's just slightly under 2023 levels. And so while weather in this first 6 months of the year was fairly mild, we had spectacular weather in January of 2023, and therefore we had some higher than normal volumes in that period. So that's why we're just slightly under our 23 performance. Total volumes at TB&T are currently on plan. And then moving to our marine ports, we continue to have very strong performance at the marine ports. Volume for the first 6 months finished 12% higher than the 2023 levels, and also 7% above the budget. There was an impact to our ports from the diversion of cargo from Port of Baltimore as a result of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. And as we evaluate that, it looks that about 3% of that volume that was higher than planned is a result of those diversions that happened in the second quarter of this year. And then finally, PATH, like other mass transit systems in the regions, continues to have a slower recovery in ridership since COVID-19 pandemic than our other business units. So for the first 6 months of this year, PATH was 13% higher than the same period in 2023, but it remains about 67% of pre-COVID levels. And it's just running right around plan, just slightly under plan for the period. So now we're all caught up. And so I will move then on to our operating revenues. So this chart just shows you the gross operating revenues by type for the 6 months, for each period for 2023, 2024, and the budget. So let me just highlight a few of the primary changes. As I mentioned, operating revenues are totaled $3.4 billion. It's an increase of 7% over the same period in 2023. And it's about 3% or $100 million over our plan for the period. This is driven by higher than planned rental revenues by 12%, and that's primarily driven by increased activity at the airports and the marine ports, as well as rent associated with the various airport redevelopment projects at Newark and JFK. In addition, aviation fees increased 10% over 2023 levels, consistent with a change in our cost recovery ratios that was agreed to with the airlines at the beginning, effective the beginning of 2024. And those are the two largest drivers, of our results for the period. So as you can see, tolls and fares are slightly ahead. There was a toll increase that was effective at the beginning of the year that's reflected in these numbers. So let me move on then to the operating expenses. For the first 6 months, they totaled $2 billion. That represents an increase of about 8% over the prior year. And most of that increased spending is supporting the higher volume activities across the agency's facilities. You can see here that employee compensation expense had an increase compared to 2023. The largest driver of that is the filling of vacancies that we had not filled during the post-COVID environment, and those vacancies occurred because of retirements and attrition. And we have filled all of those vacancies, therefore reducing our overtime and adjusting to the volumes. We also have some higher healthcare and retirement benefit costs as compared to the same period in 2023. And then contract services is up as well, and that's driven mainly by increased expenses to accommodate the higher activity levels, maintain the traffic flow at the airports, weather-related expenses, and and of course, in this security environment, heightened security and cybersecurity measures. And then finally, rents and pilots are up year over year, and that's mostly driven by the fact that as our revenues increase, our share of those revenues that are paid in rents go up commensurate. From a cash flow and liquidity perspective, we have a very strong cash flow position. Cash flow from operations were $1.5 billion. That's a 10% increase as compared to the same period in 2023. Cash and investments on hand at June 30th were $5.6 billion. We also had capital funds of $107 million and bank revolving facilities available of $350 million. And then we had 290 days cash on hand at the end of the quarter. And then finally, from a debt perspective, our bonds and other obligations increased $600 million, or 2% from the year end of 2023, and that's as a result of new bonds issued to support our capital program. That concludes my remarks, and I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Libby. Do any commissioners have comments or questions regarding the report? Hearing none, this concludes today's meeting on the Committee of Finance. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.